I stood in my own living room, the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken filling the air, a meal I'd spent hours preparing for a family gathering. My hand rested on the back of a dining chair, a sturdy oak piece I'd bought with my first real savings from catering. The table was set, candles flickering, casting a warm glow on the faces of my son, Arthur, and his wife, Clara. But when I moved to take my seat, Clara's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the gentle hum of conversation. "What are you doing, Evelyn?" she asked, her eyes narrowed slightly. "We didn't set a place for you." My breath hitched. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I looked at Arthur, my son, my only child. He sat beside Clara, his gaze fixed on his plate, meticulously cutting a piece of chicken, avoiding my eyes. The other guests, friends of Clara's, shifted uncomfortably, their polite smiles dissolving into uneasy grimaces. A sudden, heavy silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. I was still standing, wearing the floral apron I'd donned that morning, now feeling like a cruel mockery. The weight of a full day's work pressed on my shoulders, a dull ache that had settled deep into my bones. It wasn't the first time Clara had made me feel unwelcome. Her subtle barbs and dismissive gestures had become a familiar pattern. But this was different. This was public. This was in the home I had built, at the table I had bought, surrounded by people who were now witnessing my humiliation. I slowly released the chair, the smooth wood cool beneath my fingertips, took a step back, the floorboards creaking faintly under my worn slippers. Clara, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, smiled sweetly at her guests, a saccharine expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Please forgive the interruption. You know how mothers are, always wanting to be at the center of everything." A few forced chuckles rippled through the room, thin and brittle. I felt the floor open beneath me, a gaping chasm threatening to swallow me whole. Every step towards the door was a struggle, each one heavier than the last, my legs feeling like lead. The air grew thick with unspoken judgment, and the flickering candlelight seemed to mock my retreating figure. I reached the entryway, my hand finding the cold metal of the doorknob, its chill seeping into my palm. And then I stopped. Something ignited within me. Not rage, not exactly. It was something deeper, a spark that had lain dormant for too long, buried under layers of deference and quiet sacrifice. It was a flicker of self-preservation, a stubborn refusal to be extinguished. I closed my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken now tasting like ash in my mouth. When I opened them again, the world seemed sharper, clearer. I was no longer the same woman who was about to walk out of her own home with her head bowed in shame. But to understand what I did in that moment, you need to know how I got here. My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm 68 years old, and this is my house. I was born in a small coastal town, the eldest of 5 children. By the time I was 16, I was a master of the domestic arts, cooking, cleaning, caring for my younger siblings. My mother always said I had a knack for making a house a home, a comforting haven where everyone felt safe and loved. At 20, I met Thomas. He was a fisherman, strong and quiet, with hands calloused from the nets and eyes that held the deep blue of the ocean. We married 6 months later, a simple ceremony by the shore, the salty air filling our lungs with promises. A year after that, Arthur was born, my beautiful boy with his father's deep-set eyes, who clung to my finger as if it were the only anchor in his small world. His tiny grip was the strongest bond I had ever known. Thomas worked tirelessly, battling the waves, bringing in the catch. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in love and simple joys. Our evenings were filled with the smell of his pipe tobacco and the sound of Arthur's laughter. When Arthur was 7, Thomas was lost at sea. A sudden storm, a rogue wave, a fishing boat that never returned. In a matter of hours, the man I had dreamed of growing old with was gone, leaving me alone with a small boy, no money, and a mountain of grief that threatened to crush me. The world felt like it had tilted on its axis, leaving me scrambling for balance. I started taking in laundry, the rhythmic scrub of the washboard a monotonous comfort, then baking for local cafes, the warmth of the oven a welcome heat against the cold ache in my heart. Then catering small events, my hands raw and aching from chopping and stirring, but Arthur never went hungry. He never missed a day of school. Slowly, painstakingly, I saved every penny. I kept it in an old biscuit tin, its faded floral pattern a reminder of simpler times, hidden beneath loose floorboards in my bedroom. And when Arthur turned 12, I bought this house. It wasn't grand, but it was solid, with a small garden and a view of the distant ocean, a constant, shimmering presence on the horizon. I painted it myself, patched the roof, planted roses in the yard, their thorny stems a testament to resilience. Every corner of this home holds a piece of my sweat, my effort, my entire life. Arthur grew up here. We celebrated his birthdays, his graduations, his first steps, his first words. I raised him alone, poured everything I had into him, or so I thought. When Arthur turned 38, he met Clara. She was 35, with striking red hair that seemed to catch the light, and a quick, bright laugh that filled a room. The first time I saw her, I thought she was charming, intelligent, and seemed to genuinely adore my son. Arthur was smitten, his eyes alight with a happiness I hadn't seen in him for years, and I was happy for him, happy that he had found someone, that he wouldn't be alone. They married a year later, a small ceremony in the garden of this very house, the roses I had planted blooming in vibrant hues. I cooked for everyone, of course, a feast of their favorite dishes. Clara hugged me that day, her voice soft, her cheek brushing mine. "Thank you, Evelyn. You're the most wonderful mother-in-law anyone could ask for." And I believed her, every word. At first, everything seemed perfect. Clara would visit on Sundays, bringing small gifts, a scented candle, a new tea towel, helping me in the kitchen, her presence a cheerful addition, asking about my week with genuine interest. Arthur seemed happier than I had seen him in years, a lightness in his step, a sparkle in his eyes. I truly believed I was finally getting the family I had always dreamed of. Not just a son, but a daughter, someone to share my life with, to keep me company when Arthur was busy, someone to grow old with, to share stories and laughter. How terribly wrong I was. 6 months after the wedding, Arthur came to see me. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The sun was warm on my back as I tended to my rose bushes in the garden, their velvety petals a riot of color. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant, a slight tremor in his tone. "We need to talk." I dried my hands on my apron and looked at him. He had that familiar, uncomfortable expression he used to get as a boy when he'd broken something, a nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, a prickle of unease starting in my chest. "Clara and I are looking for an apartment," he explained, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of anxiety. "But the prices are astronomical, and with my salary, we're barely making ends meet." I nodded. I knew how hard things were. Rent, food, utilities, everything was more expensive, a constant uphill battle. We were thinking, maybe we could stay here with you, just for a little while, until we can save up for a deposit on our own place. He avoided my gaze, looking instead at the distant ocean. I stood silent, the scent of roses suddenly cloying, looking at my son, the boy I had raised alone, the man who was now asking for my help. How could I say no? The thought never even crossed my mind. "Of course," I told him, my voice softer than I intended, a wave of maternal instinct washing over me. "This is your home, Arthur. It always will be." Clara arrived 2 days later with 3 large suitcases, their hard shells clattering on the wooden floor. Arthur followed with 4 boxes, heavy with their belongings. They assured me it would only be for 3 months, 6 at the absolute most, their words a soothing balm to my lingering doubts. I gave them my bedroom, the largest one, the one with the ensuite bathroom, the one I had shared with Thomas, the one with the best view of the garden. I moved into the small room I used for storage, telling myself, it's temporary, just a few months. The space was cramped, filled with dusty boxes and forgotten treasures, but I convinced myself it was a small sacrifice for my son's happiness. But the months stretched on, and they were still there. Initially, Clara was charming. She helped with the dishes, humming a cheerful tune, offered to pick things up from the store, even cooked occasionally, her culinary attempts a welcome change. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. First, it was small, almost imperceptible comments, delivered with a sweet smile that belied their sharp edge. "Evelyn, do you always leave the pots to dry there? They're a bit in the way." Or, "Don't you think the dining table would look more modern against that wall?" And, "Oh, that tablecloth is so old, isn't it? I have a new one we could use." I nodded. I moved the pots. I rearranged the table. I put away my cherished tablecloth, a gift from my mother, its delicate lace now folded and hidden in a drawer. I told myself it was just her way, that she meant no harm. Then came the bigger changes, each one a small erosion of my sense of belonging. One afternoon, I returned from the grocery store, my arms laden with bags, to find that Clara had completely redecorated the living room. My antique wooden rocking chair, a gift from Thomas when Arthur was born, its smooth, worn wood a comfort to my touch, was gone. "Where's my rocking chair?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach, a cold dread spreading through me. "Oh, that old thing," Clara said, barely looking up from her phone, her thumb scrolling idly. "I put it in the garage. It didn't match the new aesthetic. I bought a new sofa. Much nicer, you'll see." She gestured vaguely at a sleek, modern piece of furniture, its stark lines a jarring contrast to the warmth of my home. I felt a lump in my throat, a burning sensation behind my eyes, but I said nothing. Thomas's rocking chair ended up gathering dust in the garage, a silent casualty, a symbol of my fading presence. Next was the kitchen. Clara declared it needed an update, that the tiles were outdated, the sink scratched, the cabinets too dark. Arthur hired a contractor. They gutted it, tearing out everything I had carefully chosen, replacing it with sleek gray subway tiles, a gleaming stainless steel sink, and stark white cabinets that felt cold and impersonal. I barely recognized my own kitchen, the heart of my home now a sterile, unfamiliar space. "It looks amazing, right?" Clara beamed at me, her face alight with satisfaction. "Now it actually makes you want to cook in here." Yet she never cooked. I was still the one preparing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, washing the dishes, cleaning up, my hands moving through the unfamiliar space with a growing sense of alienation. The months turned into a year, and they still weren't looking for an apartment. The initial promises had long since faded into the background, replaced by a comfortable inertia. One day, I dared to ask, my voice tentative, "Arthur, have you seen any places?" My son looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat, his gaze darting around the room. "Mom, it's tough out there. Prices keep climbing. Besides, Clara says we're fine here. Why waste money on rent when we can save?" Save, that was their word. But I saw no evidence of saving. Clara bought new clothes every week, her closet overflowing with designer labels. Arthur traded in his car for a newer, flashier model. They went out to expensive dinners every weekend, their laughter echoing through the house when they returned late. Meanwhile, I continued to work, my small pension barely covering my own expenses, let alone the increased utility bills and grocery costs that their presence brought. My life in my own home became a shadow existence. I ate my meals alone in the small storage room that was now my bedroom, the scent of detergent a constant companion. I walked on eggshells, careful not to disturb Clara's meticulously arranged decor, careful not to leave a single item out of place, lest I incur her subtle disapproval. My friends, who used to visit regularly, their laughter and chatter a welcome sound, stopped coming. Clara had made it clear, through subtle comments and pointed silences, that my visitors were an inconvenience, a disruption to their carefully curated peace. "Evelyn, your friends are so loud. Arthur needs his rest." Or, "Could you ask your friend not to park in the driveway? It blocks Clara's car." I started spending more time in the garden, my only sanctuary, the only place where I felt a sense of peace and ownership. I nurtured my roses, their vibrant blooms a source of quiet joy, talked to them as if they were my confidants, sharing my unspoken worries. They were the only things in my life that still felt truly mine. But even that was encroached upon. Clara decided the garden needed a modern touch. She replaced my vibrant, unruly roses with neat, symmetrical hedges, their rigid lines a stark contrast to the natural beauty I cherished. She pulled up my herb garden, the fragrant rosemary and thyme, to install a minimalist stone path, cold and uninviting. "It's much more sophisticated, Evelyn," she'd said, her voice bright and cheerful, oblivious to the quiet devastation in my eyes, the silent tears that pricked at their corners. The day of Clara's birthday party arrived. I had woken at dawn, the first hint of light barely touching the horizon, determined to make it special. I cooked all her favorite dishes: rosemary chicken, its skin perfectly crisp, roasted vegetables, their colors vibrant, a delicate lemon meringue pie, its peaks golden and inviting. I spent hours setting the table, arranging flowers I had bought myself, polishing the silverware until it gleamed. I wanted to show them both, that I was still capable, that I still cared, that I was still a vital part of this family. I wanted to be part of the family. But then came that moment at the dining table, the cold words, the public humiliation, the crushing weight of their indifference. As I stood by the doorknob cold beneath my hand, a clarity I hadn't felt in years washed over me. It was like a sudden, sharp intake of breath, a moment of profound realization. This wasn't about a chair, or a meal, or even a party. This was about my life, my dignity, my home, and I wasn't going to walk away from it. Not anymore. The spark had become a flame. I turned back into the living room, my gaze sweeping over the faces of the guests, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, then settling on Arthur and Clara. Clara, still smiling, oblivious, her red hair a fiery halo. Arthur, still avoiding my eyes, his shoulders hunched, a picture of discomfort. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, steady, and surprisingly loud, cutting through the lingering hum of conversation like a knife. "Clara," I said, and the laughter died down, replaced by an abrupt, startled silence. All eyes turned to me, their gazes heavy. "You're right. I wasn't invited. And that's a problem because this is my house." Clara's smile faltered, a crack appearing in her carefully constructed facade. "Evelyn, what are you doing? You're making a scene." Her voice was laced with a thinly veiled threat. "A scene?" I echoed, a slight bitter laugh escaping me, a sound I barely recognized as my own. "A scene is being told you're not welcome at your own table, in your own home, after spending 18 hours preparing a meal for your daughter-in-law's birthday." My gaze moved to Arthur, holding his eyes for the first time that evening. "Arthur, do you remember this house? Do you remember your father and I saving every penny to buy it? Do you remember me working 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads after he died? Do you remember painting these walls, planting these roses, celebrating every milestone within these very walls?" Arthur finally looked up, his face pale, a flicker of something akin to shame in his eyes. "Mom, please, not now." His voice was a low plea. "Oh, but now is exactly the time," I insisted, my voice gaining strength, a quiet power I hadn't known I possessed. "Because for the past 2 years, I have watched as my home, my sanctuary, has been systematically dismantled piece by piece. My rocking chair, my kitchen, my garden, my friends, even my own bedroom, all replaced, all dismissed, all in the name of modernity or saving money, and I said nothing. I accepted it. I adapted. But tonight, I am done adapting." Clara stood up, her face flushed with anger, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Evelyn, you are being completely unreasonable. We pay the utilities. We contribute. This house belongs to all of us now." Her voice was shrill, echoing in the sudden silence. "No, Clara," I said, my voice rising slightly, a tremor of emotion finally breaking through my calm facade. "It does not. This house belongs to me. I built it. I paid for it. I maintained it. You and Arthur are guests. Guests who have overstayed their welcome and forgotten the meaning of respect." The room was utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop, the air thick with tension. Arthur finally found his voice, a weak, pleading tone, his eyes wide with alarm. "Mom, you're tired. You're upset. Let's talk about this tomorrow." He tried to reach for my arm, but I stepped back. "Tomorrow?" I scoffed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Tomorrow, you'll pretend this never happened. Tomorrow, I'll still be sleeping in the laundry room, and you'll still be enjoying the fruits of my labor without a shred of gratitude." "No, Arthur, we're talking about it now." I walked over to the dining table, the polished surface reflecting the candlelight, and picked up a single, perfectly roasted potato from a serving dish. It felt heavy in my hand. I cooked all this. I spent my meager pension on this celebration, and I couldn't even sit at the table. I couldn't even eat a piece of the pie I baked. And you tell me I have to accept it? That I have to adapt? Arthur ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was deeply frustrated, caught between his wife and his mother. "Mom, we've talked about this. This house belongs to everyone now. We live here. We pay the utilities. You can't keep acting like it's only yours. Things have changed. You have to accept it. You have to adapt to the new family dynamic. Clara and I are a marriage. We are a unit. And when she makes a decision about the house, about gatherings, about anything, I support her. That's how relationships work. That's how marriage works. His voice was firm now, a defensive edge to it. Every word was a blow, a sharp jab to my heart, but they didn't hurt me like they used to. Something inside me had hardened, a protective shell forming around the raw wound. Something had broken in a way that could no longer be fixed, a final, irreparable fracture. I cooked everything, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, a stark contrast to the rising tension in the room. I spent $200 of my pension. I stayed up all night, my body aching with fatigue. I worked 18 hours to make this party perfect, and I couldn't even sit at the table. I couldn't even eat a piece of the cake I made. And you're telling me I have to accept it, that I have to adapt? Arthur avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on a point just beyond my shoulder. Nobody asked you to spend so much. Nobody asked you to cook all that. You decided to do it. And now you can't use that as an excuse to make Clara feel bad on her own birthday. She has guests. She has the right to enjoy her day without you making her feel guilty for not including you in everything. His words were a cold dismissal, a complete erasure of my efforts, my love. I just stared at him, searching his eyes for something of the boy he had been, the boy who hugged me when he had nightmares, his small arms wrapped tightly around my neck, the boy who told me I was the best mom in the world, his voice full of innocent adoration, the boy who promised he would always take care of me, his hand clasped in mine. But that boy wasn't there anymore. He was gone, replaced by this stranger. Go, I told him, my voice barely a whisper, the fight draining out of me, leaving only a profound weariness. Go back to your party. Mom, don't be like this. Don't be so dramatic. This isn't as big a deal as you're making it. Tomorrow, this will all be forgotten. You'll see, you just need to calm down a bit. Maybe you should go to your room, rest. You've worked a lot today. You're tired. And when you're tired, everything seems worse than it really is. He spoke to me as if I were a child, dismissive and condescending. I didn't say anything else. I just looked at him, my gaze unwavering, until he finally turned and left the kitchen, retreating back to the warmth and laughter of the dining room. I was left alone, surrounded by the mess of the party, the dirty dishes piled in the sink, gleaming with grease, the empty pots on the stove, their bottoms scorched, the crumbs on the floor, scattered like forgotten dreams, the stains on the tablecloth, a testament to the evening's festivities. All the work of 18 hours reduced to garbage that I would have to clean up tomorrow. I looked at the clock on the wall, its steady tick-tock a relentless march of time. It was 10:30 at night. The laughter from the dining room continued, a distant, muffled sound. The party went on, and I was here in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger, an unwelcome ghost. I took my favorite mug from the shelf, the blue mug with white flowers that Thomas had given me on our first anniversary. It was the only thing Clara hadn't thrown out, probably because she had never seen it, hidden as it was in the back of the cabinet. I poured myself some water, the cool liquid a small comfort. I sat on the stool by the window, the night air cool against my cheek, and for the first time all night, I cried. I cried in silence. No sobs, no noise. Just tears that fell onto my lap and got lost in the fabric of my apron, soaking into the worn cotton. The days after the party were strange, a surreal landscape of forced normalcy. Everyone acted as if nothing had happened, as if that night had never existed, a collective amnesia settling over the house. Clara spoke to me normally, her voice bright and cheerful, asking me to cook, to wash, to clean, her requests delivered with an air of entitlement. Arthur came home from work and gave me a kiss on the forehead. Just like always, a perfunctory gesture devoid of warmth. No one mentioned what had happened, no one apologized, and I didn't say anything either. I continued with my routine. I got up early, I made breakfast, I cleaned the house, I made lunch, I did the laundry like always. But something had changed inside me, something had broken that night, and I didn't know if it could ever be put back together. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was a deafening roar of unspoken truths. A week after the party, Clara came home with news, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Evelyn, I have to tell you something." she told me one afternoon while I was folding laundry in the living room, the scent of fresh linen filling the air. My parents are coming to stay with us for a few days. My mom needs a medical treatment in the city, and they'll be here for about 2 weeks. I'm going to give them your room. It has the perfect amount of space, and it's close to the bathroom. You can sleep on the sofa, or if you prefer, you can put a mattress in the laundry room, whatever is more comfortable for you. She spoke with an air of casual authority, as if discussing a minor inconvenience, completely oblivious to the impact of her words. I stood there with a towel in my hands, staring at her, processing what she had just said. My room, the only space I had left in this house, the only place where I could close the door and be alone, to escape the constant scrutiny and demands. And now they were taking it from me. When do they arrive? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. The day after tomorrow. So I need you to get all your things out today or tomorrow. I'm going to clean the room well and change the sheets. I want it to be perfect for them. My mom is very particular about those things. You know how moms are. They always want everything to be spotless. She smiled, a self-satisfied expression on her face. Yes, I knew how moms are, because I was one, but no one seemed to remember that. That afternoon I went up to my room. I looked around, the small bed where I had slept for the last year, its mattress now lumpy and uncomfortable, the narrow closet that barely fit my clothes, a jumble of faded fabrics, the small window that looked out onto the backyard, a sliver of green. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started taking my things out, the clothes, the shoes, the few photos I had in a box, their edges curled with age, the rosary that had belonged to my mother, its beads smooth from years of prayer, the old books I liked to read at night, their pages dog-eared and worn. I piled everything in the laundry room, an even smaller space that smelled like detergent and dampness, the hum of the washing machine a constant drone. There, between the washing machine and the brooms, I put an old mattress I found in the garage, its springs groaning under my weight. This was going to be my new room, my new reality. Clara's parents arrived 2 days later. They were older people like me, their faces etched with the lines of time. Mr. Harrison was 70 years old, a stern-faced man with a booming voice. Mrs. Eleanor was 68, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her eyes sharp and critical. They arrived with 4 large suitcases and many bags, their belongings spilling into the entryway. Clara received them with hugs and kisses, her voice effusive, her smile wide. She settled them into my old room, fussing over every detail. She made them tea, served in delicate china cups. She put on music, a classical melody that filled the house. She treated them like royalty, her attention solely focused on their comfort. I greeted them from the kitchen, a polite nod. I introduced myself. They barely looked at me. A nod of the head, a forced smile, and nothing more, their eyes already dismissive. That night, Clara cooked. For the first time in 2 years, she cooked. A lavish meal, served with crystal glasses and linen napkins, the clinking of silverware and the murmur of conversation filling the dining room. I ate a sandwich in the laundry room, the crust dry in my mouth, listening to the laughter and conversation from the dining room, a distant, alien sound. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a deep ache in my chest, but also, surprisingly, a strange calm. It was as if something had finally snapped, and with it, the pain had dulled, replaced by a quiet, resolute determination. The next morning, I woke up early, the cramped space of the laundry room feeling suffocating. I made myself a cup of tea, the warm mug a small comfort in my hands, sat on my mattress, and thought. I thought about Thomas, his strong hands, his quiet smile. I thought about Arthur as a boy, his innocent laughter, his unwavering trust. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, the endless hours, the forgotten dreams. And then I thought about myself, about Evelyn Reed, the woman who had built a life from nothing, who had raised a son, who had made a home, and I realized something fundamental. I had lost myself in the process. I had allowed myself to be erased, little by little, until there was almost nothing left, a hollow shell of the woman I once was. That day, I went to see my friend Sharon. She lived a few blocks away, her small cottage a beacon of warmth and familiarity, and I hadn't seen her in months, our friendship a casualty of Clara's subtle manipulations. She opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise, a gasp escaping her lips. "Evelyn, where have you been?" Her concern was a balm to my wounded spirit. I told her everything. The party, the humiliation, the laundry room, the final indignity of being displaced for Clara's parents. She listened, her face a mixture of shock and anger, her hands clenched into fists. "Evelyn, this is your house. You can't let them do this to you." "I know," I said, my voice firm, a new resolve hardening my features. "And I'm not going to anymore." Sharon helped me. She connected me with a lawyer, a kind woman named Ms. Davies, whose office was filled with stacks of legal tomes and the scent of old paper. Ms. Davies specialized in family law, her gaze sharp and empathetic. I explained my situation, showed her the deed to the house, the utility bills I still paid, the bank statements proving I was still the primary financial contributor, the sole owner. Ms. Davies listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly serious, her pen scratching notes on a legal pad. "Evelyn," she said, her voice calm and authoritative, "you have a very strong case. This is your home. They are living there under your implied permission, which you can revoke at any time, especially given their behavior, which borders on elder abuse and constructive eviction." The next morning, I went to the bank. The cool marble of the lobby felt solid beneath my feet. I withdrew a significant amount of money from my savings, money I had been saving for my own retirement, for a rainy day, for the future I had envisioned for myself. I then went to a hardware store, the smell of sawdust and metal filling the air, and bought a new lock for the front door, its brass gleaming, and a few smaller locks for the doors to my former bedroom and the kitchen pantry, symbols of my reclaiming. When I returned home, the house was filled with the sound of Clara's parents' laughter. They were in the living room, watching television, a half-eaten plate of cookies on the coffee table. Clara was in the kitchen, making herself coffee, the aroma of brewing beans filling the air. Arthur was still at work. I walked straight to the front door, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs, removed the old lock, its mechanism rusty and worn, and installed the new one. It took me about 20 minutes, my hands surprisingly steady, my focus absolute. When I was done, the click of the new lock a satisfying sound. I walked into the kitchen. Clara looked up, annoyed, her brow furrowed. "Evelyn, what was that noise?" I held up the old lock, its dull metal a stark contrast to the new one. "I changed the locks, Clara." Her eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief, then anger. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because this is my house," I said, looking her directly in the eye, my voice unwavering, a newfound strength resonating within me. "And I am taking it back." Clara laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, a high-pitched titter that grated on my nerves. "You're being ridiculous. You can't just change the locks. Arthur will be furious." "Arthur can be as furious as he likes," I replied, my voice calm and resolute. "But as of this moment, you and your parents are no longer welcome to stay here. You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things and leave." Clara's face turned scarlet, a flush of rage spreading across her cheeks. "You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go?" Her voice rose, a desperate edge to it. "That, Clara, is no longer my concern," I said, my voice unwavering, my gaze steady. "You have two choices. Pack your bags and leave peacefully, or I will call the police and have you escorted out. The choice is yours." Her parents, hearing the commotion, had come into the kitchen, their faces a mixture of confusion and indignation. Mrs. Harrison gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Mr. Harrison looked at me with a mixture of confusion and anger. "What is the meaning of this, young lady?" he demanded, his voice booming. "The meaning," I said, my gaze sweeping over them, "is that I am reclaiming my home. You are guests, and your stay has come to an end." Clara started to shout, to argue, to threaten, her voice rising in a furious crescendo. But I simply stood there, calm and resolute, my arms crossed, my expression unreadable. I had made my decision. I had found my voice. After a few minutes, seeing the unshakable resolve in my eyes, the futility of her arguments, she finally relented, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she shrieked, her voice cracking, "but Arthur will never forgive you for this." "Perhaps not," I said, a pang of sadness piercing through my resolve. "But I can live with that. What I cannot live with is losing myself. That evening, Clara and her parents packed their bags, the sounds of their angry whispers and the dragging of suitcases echoing through the house. Arthur arrived home to a scene of chaos, Clara sobbing dramatically, her parents fuming, their faces red with indignation. He tried to intervene, to reason with me, to tell me I was being unfair, his voice laced with desperation. "Mom, what have you done? Where are they supposed to go?" "They have until morning to figure that out, Arthur," I said, my voice still firm, though my heart ached at the sight of his distress, the pain in his eyes. "This is my home, and I am no longer willing to share it with people who disrespect me and take advantage of my kindness." He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Never been more serious," I replied, my gaze unwavering. That night, for the first time in years, I slept in my own bed, the large, comfortable bed in my old room, the soft mattress a welcome embrace. The house was quiet, a profound, peaceful silence, broken only by the gentle creak of the old floorboards. Clara, Arthur, and her parents left the next morning, their car pulling out of the driveway, laden with their belongings. I watched them go from my window, a strange mix of sadness and liberation washing over me. The house felt empty, but it was an emptiness I had chosen, an emptiness that promised peace, a quiet sanctuary. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity, a slow, deliberate process of reclaiming. I started to slowly reclaim my home, piece by piece. I brought Thomas's rocking chair back from the garage, its wood dusty but still sturdy, dusted it off, and placed it by the window, where the sunlight streamed in. I replanted my rose garden, adding new herbs and vibrant flowers, their delicate petals a riot of color, their fragrance filling the air. I removed the cold, modern decor Clara had imposed and replaced it with my own cherished belongings, things that held memories, things that felt like me, like home. I reconnected with Sharon and my other friends, inviting them over for tea and laughter, their familiar voices filling the rooms with warmth. The house slowly began to breathe again, to feel like Evelyn's home once more, a reflection of my own spirit. Months passed. I heard through Sharon that Arthur and Clara had found a small apartment, their relationship strained, a fragile thing, but they were still together. I hadn't heard from Arthur directly since that morning. Part of me missed him desperately, a maternal ache in my heart, but another part knew I had done the right thing. I needed to heal, to find myself again, to rebuild the life I had almost lost. Then, one rainy afternoon, the sky a bruised purple, there was a tentative knock on my door. I opened it to find Arthur standing there, looking tired and disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his hair unkempt. In his arms, wrapped in a soft, pastel-colored blanket, was a tiny baby, a fragile bundle of new life. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "This is Eleanor, my daughter. I named her after you." I looked at the baby. She was beautiful, her tiny face serene, her eyes closed, sleeping peacefully in her father's arms, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. "She's precious," I whispered, my heart aching with a tenderness I hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Can we come in?" he asked, his gaze pleading, a desperate hope in his eyes. "Just for a moment. I need to talk to you." I let him in. The scent of baby powder and newness filled the air. We sat in the living room, him with the baby in his arms, rocking her gently, me in my rocking chair, its familiar creak a comforting sound. "Clara and I separated," he said bluntly, his voice flat. "She left 2 weeks ago. She said she couldn't take it anymore, that being a mother was too much, that she needed time for herself, that she wasn't ready. She left and left me alone with the baby. Well, just with me. And I don't know what to do, Mom. I don't know how to take care of her. I don't know how to give her what she needs. I work all day. I don't have anyone to help me. And I thought that maybe you—" He stopped, tears starting to fall down his cheeks, tracing paths through the dust on his face. "I thought maybe you could help me. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I was a bad son, that I treated you horribly, that I let Clara humiliate you, that I didn't defend you when I should have. I know all of it, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. But I need your help. This little girl needs her grandmother, and I need my mother. His voice was a broken whisper, raw with desperation. I looked at him, at my son, the man who had broken my heart, the man who had expelled me from my own life, now so vulnerable, so lost. Part of me wanted to say yes. I wanted to take that baby in my arms, to feel her warmth against my chest, to soothe her cries. I wanted to help. I wanted to be the grandmother, the mother, the one I had always been, the caretaker, the fixer. But another part of me, the part that had learned to value herself, the part that had fought to get her dignity back, knew that I couldn't go back to that place. Not entirely. "Arthur," I said slowly, my voice gentle but firm, "that baby is beautiful, and I love her because she is my granddaughter, because she has my blood. But I can't do what you're asking. I can't go back to being the one who sacrifices, the one who forgets about herself for others. I learned something these past few months. I learned that I matter too, that my life is also valuable, and that I can't help anyone if I'm broken myself." "Mom, please, just listen," he pleaded, his eyes wide with desperation. "I'm not saying I don't want to see my granddaughter. I'm not saying I don't want to be part of her life, but it has to be on my terms, with respect, with boundaries. You can visit me. You can bring her. I can watch her for a few hours if you need it. But I am not going to be your lifeline. I am not going to let you come back into my life to destroy it again. If you want me to be here, you have to respect my space, my house, my peace." My voice was unwavering, a testament to the strength I had found. Arthur looked down, his shoulders slumping in resignation. He nodded slowly, the tears still tracing paths on his cheeks. "I understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're right about everything, and I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." "I know," I said, a soft sigh escaping me. "And I forgive you, because you are my son, and because life is too short to hold grudges. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning, and I've learned. I've learned that I deserve respect, that I deserve love, that I deserve to exist." Arthur stood up, carefully adjusting the baby in his arms. He gave me a kiss on the forehead, a tender, hesitant gesture. "I'm going to do better, Mom. I promise." "I hope so," I said, watching him, a mix of hope and caution in my heart. He left, the front door closing softly behind him, leaving a quiet echo in the house. I stayed in my rocking chair, looking out the window, feeling something different in my chest. It wasn't pain, it wasn't sadness, it was peace. A profound, quiet peace. The days kept passing. Arthur started to visit once a week, always calling ahead, always respectful. He brought the baby. I held her. I played with her. I rocked her to sleep, her tiny hand gripping my finger, a new anchor in her small world. But when they left, I went back to my routine, to my life, to my space, a life I had carefully rebuilt. Sharon visited me, other friends from the neighborhood too. I started going out more, walking in the park, the fresh air invigorating, going to the market, lingering over the vibrant produce, living without fear, without the constant weight of someone else's expectations. One night, sitting in my rocking chair, the familiar creak a comforting rhythm, looking at the stars through the window, their distant light twinkling, I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the pain, the fight, the victory, and I understood something. I hadn't won because I had kicked someone out. I hadn't won because I had fought. I had won because I had chosen myself. Because I had learned that loving others doesn't mean you stop loving yourself. Because I had understood that taking care of others doesn't mean neglecting myself. Because I had discovered that my life, my house, my peace were worth just as much as anyone else's. I looked around. My house was silent, but it was a full silence, full of dignity, full of respect, full of self-love. I got up from the rocking chair. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a tea, the warm steam rising from the mug. I sat by the window, the cool glass against my cheek. Outside, the moon was shining, a silver disk in the inky sky. The stars were twinkling, countless pinpricks of light. The night was calm, and so was I. For the first time in years, I felt that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in my house, in my life, in my peace. I had gotten back everything they had taken from me, but above all, I had gotten myself back, and that was the only thing that really mattered. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.